Christ returns, speaks his truth. Letter 2. This letter should be pondered rather than read. I am the Christ. Whilst I operate from the highest realms of divine creative consciousness, my influence encircles your world. Speaking metaphorically, I am as distant in consciousness from your world as your sun is distant from your earth. Yet if you call on me sincerely, I am as close to you as is necessary to help you. There are many who will be unable to receive these letters. Such people are not yet ready for them. There will be those who will try to stifle their existence, since the teaching will be threatening their livelihood or religion. They will not succeed. These letters will be strengthened by opposition. There will be those who will receive these letters with joy, since their souls they have known that beyond the religions of the world has been truth, the reality of existence. These are the people who will prosper and eventually save the world from self-annihilation. I will now take up my autobiography from where I left off in my last letter. My purpose in giving you some of the biographical details of my entrance into public life as teacher and healer is to bring alive for you my youthful attitudes and behavior, the circumstance of my attaining my own state of spiritualized humanhood. It is important you should be able to visualize Palestine as it was when I was on earth, and clearly see the inner conflicts which my teaching aroused in the people indoctrinated in their Jewish beliefs and traditional rites. These conflicts lie at the heart of the Gospeler's inability to record accurately all that I tried to teach them. In the Gospels are frequent references to my parables describing the reality of the kingdom of heaven or kingdom of God, which term the Gospelers use, but nowhere has any attempt been made to reach into the words himself, explore the figure of speech, or lift out of the spiritual meaning of the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven. As I speak of my true sermons given to the people, you will, in the light of my experiences in the desert and of your own knowledge of scientific facts, be able to understand at last a little of what I was attempting to teach at the time. Since I was largely unsuccessful, it is imperative another attempt should be made to do so. At the beginning of this age, this millennium, since it is on my privileged, highest spiritual knowledge and insight that the next age will be founded and developed. It was and is essential for a teacher such as I, and others have been, supersensitive and wholly committed mentally and emotionally to a search for truth of existence, to come to earth to coin words to describe to people on earth imprisoned in words what lies in the creative universal dimension in an unformed state. Were it not for such inspired teachers, people on earth would have remained in ignorance of all the lies beyond the earth, ready for contact to be personally experienced and absorbed to promote future spiritual evolution. Not only this, the Bible is said to be the most widely read book in the world. In its present form, it has served its purposes. The New Testament, as it stands, with all its baggages of misinterpretation, is a deterrent to spiritual evolution. It is now time to move forward into a new realm of mystical perception and understanding. Since it is impossible for me to descend into human body again to speak to the world, and I have other dimensions to whom I minister, I have trained a sensitive soul to receive and transcribe. It is the nearest I can do to talking to you personally. I hope you will be able to receive and accept this. Whatever is erroneous is erased. You may be sure of this. The incidents and healings related in the following pages are not important. They happen, but they are given only to enable you to understand their true spiritual significance. I want you, as you read, to relate the condition of 2,000 years ago to your present life and times. I want you to regard the persona of Jesus as an icon of what can eventually be achieved by every human being who is ready and willing to become a founder member of the kingdom of heaven on earth. Although people of your present world are what you call sophisticated, big-headed in their modern knowledge and learning, versed in contemporary manners, and in new ways of relating to one another, basically, the people of these years ago were the same as yourself. They were controlled and motivated entirely by their twin impulses of bonding rejection, desires repulsions, even as you are. They loved, hated, criticized, condemned, slandered, and gossiped, possessed ambitions to rise to the top of society, despised those who were failures in life, secretly slept around, as you call it, and taunted those who were different in any way to themselves. To help you fully understand and enter into my time on earth, my consciousness has descended to your plane of earthly existence to experience yet again the persona of Jesus and the emotion and events in which I was involved. When I left the desert and put foot to the road leading to my village of Nazareth, I was still elated, exuberantly joyous in the knowledge so glorious revealed to me in the desert. I focused my thoughts entirely on all that I had learned, And if my thoughts stayed to my former negative forms of thought, I swiftly turned to the Father for inspiration and determination in overcoming them. In this way, I returned constantly to the light of awareness and understanding. Some people looked at me askance, seeking my joy and also my dirty, unkempt appearance. Was I happy with drink, they wondered. Others looked at me with abhorrence. Instead of reacting with anger, as in the past, I remember that I had been blessed with visions and knowledge that they could not even begin to imagine. I blessed them and prayed for their inner vision to be similarly opened, and continued peacefully along the road to my home. There were villagers, however, who viewed my pitiful state with compassion and hurried into their houses to fetch me bread, and even wine to help me on my way. There was always someone who offered shelter for the night. The Father life indeed supplied all my needs and gave me protection as needed. All this time, I said not a word about my weeks in a desert. I felt that the time was not yet ripe. Eventually I reached my hometown Nazareth, and the villagers, openly scoffed, pointed at my filthy self and tattered clothes. Dirty, lazy layabout were some of the kinder words thrown at me. I came to my mother's door with a feeling of dread, since I knew she would be more shocked than the neighbors when she saw me stand in front of her, thin bones showing through skin, eyes sunken and cheeks hollowed out, face burnt black and lips blistered with the sun, and beard grown long and staggly. My clothes. She would be outraged when she saw my clothes, their original color wholly obscured by desert dust and the cloth torn and ragged. I mounted the steps and braced myself to endure the heat of my mother's fury. When I knocked, my sister came to the door. She looked at me, open-mouthed, wide-eyed, and frightened, then slammed the door in my face. I could hear her running to the back of the house screaming, "Mother, come quickly, there's a dirty old man at the door." I could hear my mother muttering crossly to herself, hurrying to the door. Flinging she open, she stood, rooted in her shock. I smiled but for a moment. She looked me up and down with increasing horror as she realized this dreadful creature was indeed her wayward son, Jesus. I held out my hand to her, saying, "I know I cause you much pain, but can you help me?" Immediately her expression changed, and drawing me inside, she secured the door. "Quick," she said to my frightened sister, "stop that noise and put water on the boil. Your brother is starved. It doesn't matter what trouble he has got into. He belongs to us. He must be looked after." Gently she helped me take off my clothes and bent me over a large container of water and scrubbed me clean. She washed and trimmed my hair and beard and lightly covered the sores on my body and lips with a healing salve. Neither of us broke the silence. I savored the love she showed me and tried to show my gratitude by a more gentle and sensitive approach. Having helped me put on a clean robe, she sat me down to a frugal meal of bread, milk, and honey. Reluctantly, she gave me wine to pick up my strength, but it was obvious she thought that wine had been the cause of my shocking plight. Then she led me to a bed and placed a cover over me. I slept for several hours and woke refreshed to a morning bright with sunshine seen through the window. I was now longing to talk to my mother, to tell her that I was indeed a Messiah, but not the kind the Jews imagined. I could save people from the bad results of their sins. I could help them find health, abundance, fulfillment of their needs, because I could now teach them exactly how the Word had been created. As I tried to tell her, she started off by being excited and delighted. She jumped to her feet and wanted to rush out to tell the neighbors her son was indeed the Messiah. They should hear how nicely he now talked, and he had been fasting in the desert. But I stopped her from doing this. I told her that I had not yet told her what she had been revealed to me. One of the most important things I had learned was that the Orthodox Jews were entirely wrong in their belief in an avenging God. There was no such thing. This frightened and upset her, and she exclaimed, "How then will Jehovah govern the world and make us good and listen to his prophets, if he does not punish us? Are you now so big that you are going to tell the high priests their own business handed down to them from the time of Moses? Are you going to bring more shame on the house?" She began to cry, saying with anger, "You've not changed a bit. You're only changed in what you're saying. You have brought me nothing but grief. How could I ever believe you would be a Messiah? You will only lead people into greater torment than ever before with your strange ideas." My brother heard her wailing and came running, wanting to turn me out of the house. Because I did not want a disturbance, I offered to leave peacefully. In this was how my mother reacted. I could be sure that everyone else would react in the same way to what I wanted to tell them. I realized I needed a quiet time of absolute rest and silence in which to collect all my thoughts and experiences together. I would have to pray for inspired guidance on how best to approach the Jews with my message of good news. I was sure that the Father life would meet my need, and I would find the right accommodation somewhere. My mother, although furious with my seemingly big-headed attitudes, was nonetheless torn with her feelings of love and compassion for my emaciated condition. She rejected everything I appeared to stand for: rebelliousness, contempt for the Jewish religion, high-handed attitude towards authority, my self-will and arrogance, but she still loved me and was deeply afraid that I would eventually end up in greater trouble than I'd ever thought possible. She admonished my brothers, telling them to hold their noisy arguments and turn to me. "You can stay here until you are better," she said. "Perhaps, whilst you are here, I can talk some sense into you. I can tell you now, if you go into the streets and begin talking as you have to me, you will end up in an even worse state than ever. Good people will spit and throw their rotten rubbish over you. You are a disgrace to your family." So, despite her anger, I laughed and thanked and kissed her warmly. Gladly I remained with her, knowing very well that underneath her anger she was deeply anxious for me. She fed me well and made me good new clothes. I appreciated all she did towards improving my appearance, as I knew to move freely between rich and poor, I must be acceptably clad in decent garments. At times there were food shortages in the home. Drawing on the power of my father, I replenished them, saying nothing. Neither did she. I knew she wondered sadly whether to all my other bad habits I had now added that of a thief. Then she caught me with a freshly baked loaf in my hands, and knew that I had not been out of the house to buy it, and neither had a stove been in use that day. She said nothing, but gave me a long, pondering look. I could see her attitudes change at the moment, but she was no longer sure of her ground. She was beginning to question her own attitudes towards me, and also the truth of my statements. What really happened to him out in the desert? How could he make a loaf of bread without fire, flour, and yeast? What does it mean? Is he the Messiah? Then my brother cut his hand. He was in much pain when it festered. He allowed me to put my hands on his wound and quietly pray. I could see that he felt the power flow into his hand, because he looked at me strangely. "The pain is gone," he said briefly. He was surly as he walked away, and I knew that whilst he was relieved to be free of pain, he did not like me for having been able to help him. I sensed his jealousy. My sister scalded her hand, and another complained of bad headaches. I was able to cure them both. My brothers and sisters began to joke about my magic powers. They questioned what evil I might do to them if they angered me. The tension in the home deepened, and I felt sadness for my mother, who longed for peace in the house. But she saw changes in my behavior and was comforted. I was quieter, visibly controlled likely outburst, reined in my energy, curbed impatience, no longer argued. I became more caring, listened to her womanly grumbles, helped her in the house by repairing broken furniture, and walked the hills to distant farms to find the fruit and vegetables she wanted. I came to love her tenderly and compassionately as a mother should be loved. One day she ventured to ask me, "Do you still say that Jehovah is a myth?" Job said that if Jehovah were to withdraw his breath, all flesh would collapse together. That is Jehovah I believe in and saw. "No one has seen Jehovah," she said firmly. "I saw that which has brought all things into being," I replied quietly. "I call it the Father, because it is perfect love. Love more perfect than a mother's," I added, smiling at her. "It works in, through, and for all its creation. It is the Father in me which has brought you the things you needed in the house and healed my brothers and sisters so swiftly." I could see she was beginning to understand a little of what I said. "What of sin?" she asked. "There is no sin as we understand it. We are born to behave as we do. We have to find a way to overcome our human thoughts and feelings, for they separate us from the protection of the Father and brings us our sickness and misery. When we have learned how to overcome the self, we will enter the kingdom of heaven." My mother turned away silently, obviously pondered what I had said to her, but no longer angry. I knew she was thinking about my statements and realized they would be turning her safe and well-known world upside down. Without her belief in a Jehovah threatening dire vengeance if mankind was unruly, she would feel lost and insecure. She would wonder how the world would ever manage if it was left entirely to men to control the evil doings of themselves and others. Even kings and governors were wicked in their actions. Without Jehovah to rule and punish sinners, where would it end? Whilst gaining my strength, I studied the Scriptures diligently to enable me to meet Pharisees and scribes with confidence. I was also imperative I should know what had been written of the Messiah, because I was convinced I was he of whom the prophets had spoken. I could indeed rescue, save people from misery, sickness, and poverty, even restore them to health and prosperity, by showing them the truth concerning the kingdom of heaven and the reality of the Father. When I felt I was sufficiently prepared to go out and teach and heal, to please my mother, I agreed to go one Sabbath to the synagogue in Nazareth and speak to the congregation. As was customary, I stood up, and was handed Isaiah to read. I chose the passage prophesizing a Messiah would come who would release the Jews from every type of bondage. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovering of the sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. Then I sat down, saying, Today you have seen this prophecy fulfilled in me. There was a shock and amazement on the men's faces, but I continued to speak, knowing that the Father would tell me what to say. The words came without hesitation. I spoke about my experience in the desert and related my vision of the baby growing into manhood, all the while, unknowingly, wrapping himself around with mental thongs and chains, thus blinding and imprisoning himself into interior darkness and shutting himself off from God. I explained that in doing so they expose themselves to oppression from conquerors, slavery, poverty, and disease. For God is light, I said, and light is the substance of all visible things. And light is love, which makes all things for man to enjoy. All blessings of abundance and health were freely available to him who loved God with mind, heart, and soul, and lived strictly according to the laws of God. When I had finished, there was complete silence in the synagogue. I felt that the congregation had experienced something strange and powerful, and had been lifted into a higher plane of thought, and wanted nothing to disturb the transcendent tranquility of the moment. Then the whispering started among themselves. They were wondering who I was. Some were convinced that I was the person Jesus, whose family was known in the village, but others could not accept this, since I had spoken as one having authority. Unfortunately, I felt my own reactions to these religious men returning. I knew they had despised me in the past, and so I expected rejection. I slipped back into my own challenging attitudes and thoroughly angered them. Through my own human reactions, I invited disaster, and disaster I almost got. The younger men, urged on by their elders, rushed at me and dragged me to the highest cliff top to hurl me to death. But I prayed to my Father for deliverance. Suddenly it seemed that they were so stirred up they hardly knew what they were doing and turned on each other. I was able to slip from their midst and escape. It was strange. They seemed not to notice my going. Badly shaken by my experience, I managed to send a message to my mother, saying I was leaving Nazareth immediately and was going down to Capernaum, as a gracious town by the Sea of Galilee. At first, I thought to join an old acquaintance, but I felt intuitively this was not the right thing to do. So all the way down, and on entering the town, I prayed for the Father's direction and help in finding accommodation. I had no money and would not beg. As I walked the street, a woman of middle years came towards me, heavily laden with baskets on her arms. Her countenance was sorrowful. It seemed she had been crying. On impulse, I stopped her and asked her where I might find accommodations. She said briefly that she would normally offer me a bed, but she had a very sick son at home. She added that she had been to buy provisions to feed the comforters who had already gathered to mourn when her son died. My heart grieved for her, but also rejoiced. Straightway I had been led to someone I could help. I expressed my sympathy and offered to carry her baskets to her house. She looked at me for a moment, wondering who it might be, but was apparently satisfied by my appearance and demeanor. On the way I said that I could probably help her son. "Are you a doctor?" she asked. I replied that I had received no medical training, but nonetheless I could help him. On reaching her house, large and well built of stone, indicating social standing and prosperity, she took me to her husband, saying, "This man says he can help our son." He nodded morosely but said nothing. The woman, Miriam, drew me away, saying he was distressed and very angry. "The boy is our only son amongst many daughters, and he is blaming God for giving the child the sickness." Miriam wept. If he speaks like this against God, what other troubles will be headed upon us, I wonder? "Take comfort," I said. "Shortly your son will be well again." She looked doubtful, but led me to the room in which the boy lay. It was hot and stifling, and filled with gloomy, talkative well-wishers. I asked the mother to clear the room, but the visitors were resistant. They wanted to see what would be done, and only left reluctantly when Miriam called her husband to speak to them. I could hear them arguing with the father in the next room. What did he think this man could do if the doctor had been unable to help the boy? The father came into the room to see for himself. His son was deathly pale and had a high fever. The mother explained he could not keep his food down and had loose bowels. He had been like that for several days and had lost so much weight the doctor had said nothing could be done for him. He would probably die. I placed my hand on the boy's head and prayed, knowing and silently giving heartful thanks that the father's life would flow down through my hands and into his body. Thus the healing work would be accomplished. I felt extreme heat and tingling vibration in my hands, and the power pouring into his frail body. I was overcome with joyous thanksgiving. How great, how wonderful was the Father of life when released to do its natural work of healing. His mother and father, looking anxious, wondering what would happen next, held each other's hands and watched intently. As they saw their son's color gradually change from white to a more healthy glow, they exclaimed in astonishment and delight. After some time the boy looked up at me, saying brightly, "Thank you, I am well now. I am hungry and want something to eat." His mother laughed with happiness and held him close, but also looked apprehensive. "I cannot give you food, my son. The doctor will be angry." She had been warned to starve him of all but water. I smiled and said, "He is cured. You can give him bread and wine, and he will keep it down." His father, Zeta, was all amazed joy and gratitude. After embracing his beloved boy, he turned to me and wrung my hands warmly. He kept patting my shoulder, but shaking his head, unable to speak for the tears which were running down his cheeks. When he had largely recovered his composure, he went through the living room and said to the people, "My son, almost dead, has been returned to fullness of life again." His words were met with a great clamor of jubilation, excitement, disbelief, questioning, laughter, and congratulations. The boy's mother stood there, her face wreathed in smiles. At that, there was no question of needing accommodation. When Zedekiah told the astonished comforter that the boy was cured, and the youth himself appeared smiling at the door and asked yet again for food, the well-wishers, one and all, gathered around me and invited me to their homes. However, I preferred to remain with the boy's father, who now said he had many questions to ask me. He hoped I could answer them. After food and wine were placed on the table and everyone was invited to eat their fill, Zedekiah sat down and asked his first question. He said, "You have done something no priest or doctor could do. Healing only comes of God. Although you are a stranger, I perceive you must come from God." "Yes," I said, and the people murmured wonderingly. "This illness, which has come upon my son, was this a punishment for something I have done wrong in the past? And how could I commit so grievous a sin that God should want to take my only son from me?" Many of the people nodded when they heard these words. "You have asked the question I most want to answer, Zedekiah. God gives us life and being. He would not snatch away as a man will snatch some treasure from another man, because he is angry with him. This is the way that mankind behaves, not God. And God is not placed on a throne in some part of the sky like human kings sit on thrones and govern their people. This is the human way and a human belief, not truth. The way of God is far beyond anything the human mind can devise or dream about. I alone have seen that which has brought us into being. And I know that it is not the kind of God taught by the rabbis. I saw that it is perfect love, and for this reason I would rather speak of the Father, for I have seen that it works within every living thing, keeping them in a good state of health, even as a human father works to keep his children well fed, clothed and protected within the shelter of a home. I have seen it within everything in the world." "How can that be?" a man asked doubtfully. "It is not possible for an individual being of any kind to be everywhere at once, but the air is everywhere, although we cannot see it. Nonetheless, we know, and do not doubt, it is very real and very important to our existence. If there were no air and we could not breathe, we would die. The movement of air, which we call wind, we cannot see, but we see it agitate the leaf and drive the clouds across the sky. So we know that air is around and above us and is strong. And now I will ask you, what is the most real and valuable part of a man, his body or his mind?" Some answered it was the body. Others said it would have no place on earth, could not work, could not be seen, would not be known. Others said that they thought that his mind was more important than his body. And I answered, his mind is the most important part of him, since, without his mind, he could not power his body. He could not eat, drink, sleep, move, plan, or live. Yet we cannot see mind. We can only know we have a mind because of the thoughts it produces, and because the thoughts fashion some kind of action in our lives. We believe mind works through the brain. Yes, it does. For how could brain, born of flesh, produce thoughts, feeling, ideas, and plans? And now it should be clear to you that this is how the Father is present within all things. It is the directing mind, behind the human mind, working its great works within every living being. We know this is so, for we see the marvels it brings about. We see the growth of children. We see the food they eat miraculously change into another substance which nourishes and makes them grow. How this happens, we do not begin to know or even imagine. Even if we did know, we would still not know what set such an important life process to work in living bodies of every species. See how wonderfully the bodies of each species is fashioned and created purposely, expressly to transform the kind of food they ate into nourishment to grow bone, blood, and flesh. Now you show us these things. We can see they are truly marvelous, the young man explained. They are. We see the young bodies going through their various stages of development, and we see their minds keeping pace with their physical development until the youth and maidens begin to long to find a spouse, and to become parents themselves. Then the great work of conception is accomplished, and the growth of the seed within the womb continues, until it comes forth as a full-term child. Think, who determines all this steady, orderly growth within the woman? From whence come the plans which govern the right development of head, body, and limbs, and are unvarying from one woman to another, and from one species to another? Who decides the exact moment when birth shall begin? The physical means by which the child shall be brought forth from the womb, the provisions of milk for the child. Think, is it the mother? No, it is not the mother. She is but witness of all that takes place in her from the moment her husband has been to her and planted his seed to join with her. Does God do all these things from afar? Do his thoughts reach out to each man and woman and create when these things shall take place? No. All this work is accomplished by the creative mind power, the intelligently loving life within every living being. We see the parents' love of their young, be they bird, animal, man. Where does this love come from? It is drawn from the creative mind power, perfect love, of the Father within us. It is because the Father does the work within the trees, plants, birds, animals, and man himself, that we are here today, living, breathing, eating, sleeping, having children, growing old, and then dying to pass on to some more happy place. All of this is the work of the Father active within us. How can you possibly deny the truth of all I have said tonight? Today you saw a dying youth brought back to fullness of life within a short time. Was it who healed him? Not at all. Of myself I can do nothing. It was the life that is the Father active within all things, who came in full force to repair an alien body, and bring it back to full health, again because I believed it would and did not doubt. There were sighs of satisfaction in the room, new light, new interest, even new gentleness showed in their faces. Why then does man suffer so grievously? Miriam asked. Because when man is begotten, when life takes on form within the seed, it takes on the humanhood which separates it from every other individual in the world. To make it single, a lone figure, joined to none other, solitary, private, its own person, it becomes subject to, is controlled by two mightily strong impulses in its earthly nature. To hold fast to all these things he greatly desires, and to reject and push away all that he does not want. These two most basic impulses in man underlie every single thing he ever does throughout his life, and are entirely responsible for the trouble man brings upon himself. Although the Father is active within man, it has nothing of humanhood in it. Therefore the Father holds nothing, rejects nothing, condemns nothing, does not even see wrongdoing. All that man does which man calls sin is only of this world and is only punished within this world. For it is a law of earthly existence, as you know, that whatever you sow you will reap as a like harvest. Because he draws life and mind from the Father, man himself is creative in thought, words, and deed. Whatever he thinks, says, does, and believes returns to him in like form some time later. There is no punishment from the Father. Whatever ills come to mankind is of their own making entirely. People murmured that this was a new teaching altogether, and yet it made greater sense than all they had ever been taught before. Several voices urged me to tell them more. I tell you, in me you have seen the life active as healing. Follow me, and you will hear of the path you must walk to find happiness. In my words you will find the truth of existence never yet revealed by any other man. It has been said of the Messiah, he will utter secrets hidden from the beginning of creation. I tell you truly, these secrets you will hear from me. If you listen carefully and grasp their meaning, and practice their truth, and hold fast to their laws, you will be made new and will enter into the kingdom of heaven. After I spoke, the people were quiet for a moment, and then there was a clamor of excited talk, but Zedekiah stood up and said it was time for the household to settle down. His boy needed sleep, and his wife and daughters, too, were weary after all their weeping. It was arranged that, the next morning, I should go down to the harbor and 6 people would be brought to me. Thus I was able to launch my mission, and everything was speedily arranged for me in the best possible way. It seemed that if I did not heal, there would be no interest and no acceptance of all I had to tell them. Healing demonstrated the truth of what I wanted to teach, and my teachings would explain the reason why I was able to bring them healing from the Father. When I woke the next morning, I felt joyously alive with the expectation of wondrous things to come. After I had broken my fast, I set out with Zedekiah towards the town harbor, my heart aglow with love for everyone I passed. I greeted them warmly, telling them I had good news for those who wanted to hear it. When I reached the jetty, I found men, women, and children seated on the ground, awaiting my arrival. Some held out their hands to me imploringly. Those looked very ill. Some were crippled, many were covered in sores. My heart still ached for their pitiful state, but now I could also rejoice, because I knew it was not the Father's will they should be like this. Quite the contrary, the Father was itself, all healing, all health, all fitness. I had proved this the night before and in my home. I exulted that I would be able to demonstrate this wonderful truth to the crowds now gathering around me. One sad old face caught my attention. She was wrinkled and thin and crooked. I went to her, and kneeling beside her, I placed my hands on her head, and immediately felt the flow of Father power through my hands, vibrating through her head until her whole body shook with the life force, energizing her limbs. People watching us were astonished and wondered what I might be doing to her, but others quietened their objections. Gradually, her limbs began to unbend, lengthen, straighten. Her face became alive with the joy of returning strength. I helped her to stand up. Then she stood proudly by herself. She was so overcome with happiness, she began to weep, then laughed and danced, calling out to the people. "Praise God," she said, "praise God." And others standing there took up the refrain. They were all deeply moved by what they had seen. The crush of people pressing in against my person was so great, Zedekiah offered to control them in orderly fashion, assisted by the other eager onlookers. He marshaled the sick toward me, that I might attend to them according to their deepest need. At last, feeling tired, my host invited me back to his house to dine. He sent away those whom I had not been able to heal for lack of time. He assured them I would return the following day. It was a festive evening, so much to talk about, so much to celebrate, so much to teach, so much to learn. All of it certainly good news, the people agreed. I knew that by many I was accepted as speaking truly of what I had seen in the desert. And so it continued for many days. People came to see me from far and wide. Zedekiah and others of his friends helped me to control the crowds to enable me to heal and teach. The people listened gladly. They were talking amongst themselves about the Father, and were eager to learn more about the throngs and chains which bound people into misery. The crush became so great I soon realized I would have to find my own helpers on whom I could rely to assist me. It was time for Zedekiah to return to conduct his leather business, which he had been neglecting. I went away to the hills to pray about choosing disciples. When the conviction came to me that I would be guided as to whom to choose, I returned to Capernaum. I felt a strong inclination to go down to the waterfront to speak to some men I had seen listening intently to my teaching. Whether they would leave their fishing nets to join me remained to be seen. But when I called them, Simon, Andrew, James, and John, they came immediately, happy to help in my work of healing and teaching. Others also joined me as I began my work amongst the people. I left my host Zedekiah's house with his warm assurance I would return at any time. Thus it was that I commenced my mission as a teacher and healer, wandering wherever needed through towns and villages. Before setting out, I gathered together the young men who had consented and were eager to help me. They would be listening to my teaching, and would be mystified by much that I wanted to say. It was vital that I should first explain the background to all that had been revealed to me in the desert. I told them that despite my previously lazy way of life, I had always had a profound compassion for people. It was my compassion that made me turn from the God taught by the rabbis. When I spoke of my total rejection of a punishing Jehovah, I could see the doubt and shock in their face. At considerable length, I explained that I questioned how it was possible to speak of a good God when there was so much suffering endured by innocent children. As I spoke, I saw their faces gradually relaxed. I continued to voice my previous doubts and anger until I saw their expressions change into those of acceptance and then full agreement. I discovered I had put to them their own doubts and questions which, previously, they had never had the courage to put into words. As we spoke together, I could sense their relief that they were no longer alone in their secret resistance to the rabbi's teaching. I told them there came a time when I began to realize even more clearly that I was wasting my life. I wanted to change and felt very strongly I should go to John the Baptist as a starting point, as it were to the commandments of a new way of living. I described what happened during the baptism in my 6 weeks in the desert. I explained that all of my previous thoughts and beliefs, attitudes, arrogance, rebelliousness were gradually cleansed from my consciousness, whilst I was going through the deep revelation and vision showing me the reality I now call the Father. I explained the nature of the Father, and that his divine nature always constituted the divine will. I told him that it was man himself who, through wrong thinking and wrong behavior, shut himself off from the Father within him, and man alone, by first repenting and then by mental emotional cleansing, could find his own way back to full contact with the Father. When this was accomplished, the full nature of the Father would be released into the person's mind, heart, body, soul, and his life environment and experience. As this happened, such a person would enter into the kingdom of heaven ruled by the Father, and also the kingdom of heaven would be established within the consciousness of the person. He would then have attained the purpose behind his existence. As I spoke to my disciples, I saw their reactions reflected in their faces. All doubt had gone. There was now a light of dawning comprehension and joy. These young men became enthusiastic believers and exclaimed, "This is indeed good news." However, after their first acceptance of all that I said, there were times when they wondered whether all I said could be true. I understood this. To be prepared to rid themselves of the image of Jehovah so deeply imprinted in their mind took a great deal of courage. There were times when they spoke amongst themselves and questioned who was this man claiming such marvels. Supposing they came along with me and it turned out that I was really a messenger from Satan, what then? They would be severely punished by Jehovah. They had much to lose, their standing in society as sober, hard-working young men, their reputation as tradesmen and artisans, their loss of income, and biggest obstacle of all, the probable anger and rejection by their families. What would they receive in return? I told them I could not promise them any earthly reward for their help in spreading the gospel of good news. I had no doubt at all that whenever we went, we would be given food and shelter and would be well received by people. I could only promise them the truth, that the Father knew their needs and would fulfill them and keep them healthy. I could also promise them that as they turned to the Father and trusted the Father every step of the way, they would be happy in a way they had never been happy before. They would experience the kingdom of heaven themselves to the extent they set aside the demands of self and served other people. They would witness the healing, and these would increase their faith and give them the courage to endure any discomforts of the journey. And this was how we came to start on our mission of spreading the good news of the gospel of the kingdom. I sent these young men ahead of me into the town where we were to visit. As they entered it, they told the people to gather to hear the good news of the kingdom of heaven. The people were astonished and wanted to know more, but the disciples urged them to fetch their friends and neighbors, and they would be told all about it when Jesus arrived. And there would be healing of the sick people. Excitedly, many ran to help spread the good news, and soon they were gathered together in a huge crowd. I, who so deeply and passionately rebelled against the long-faced religious homilies threatening violence, punishment, and damnation to sinners, now walked with joy to meet these crowds. I had my good news to share with them to brighten their day, and healing of ailments and affliction to gladden their life. Whereas before I moved amongst people selfishly and empty-handed, taking their goodwill and sometimes their handouts with little gratitude, I came now with an abundance of life-giving possibility for everyone who is prepared to listen to my word and take action to improve his quality of life. I want you who are reading these pages to fully understand my position at that time, my state of consciousness after my illumination in the desert, and the persona I presented to my countrymen as Jesus. There have been so many conjectures that I am about to give you the truth. I was born to have, when mature, a fine physique, strong, aquiline features, a remarkable intellect, and a love of mimicry and laughter. But like so many of you today, I took no care of my earthly talents. At the time of going into the desert, my face and manners were what you might call downgraded from what they should have been. Whilst I have begun to examine and rebel against what I had become, my intellect had also suffered from misuse, constantly engaged in arguments and dissension over religion and indulging in flippant speech. I made people laugh. I was liked by the men and women I mixed with, but certainly not respected. Hence the astonishment of those who had known me when I spoke to them in the synagogue in Nazareth. Whilst my mother nursed me back to good health, I made powerful use of the knowledge and enlightenment given to me in the desert. This restored me to the man I was meant to be. When I started my mission, I was fully aware that I was the only one with the supreme knowledge of the secrets of creation and existence itself. Therefore, I could say with perfect confidence, no one has seen the Father but me. I knew that all the men believed in so wholeheartedly was false, not real. I knew that I had been specially fashioned and designed by the Father for this mission. I had been blessed abundantly with physical energy, vitality of speech, and the ability to devise meaningful parables to enable me to pass on the message successfully and in a form that would never be forgotten. Besides which, I understood my fellow men so well from long association with them that I knew their fondest hopes, their more desperate fears. I knew what made them laugh and prompted them to mockery and derision of the rich and pompous. And I knew also how deeply so many young and old suffered silently and bravely. I knew and experienced deep compassion for the populace which lived in fear of, or endured, the verbal whiplash of Pharisees, and bowed down to the tax laws of the Romans. I knew how their proud Jewish spirit was bruised by the conquering Gentiles when they were forced to honor with their lips and hand and knee salutations, yet whom they despised behind closed doors. I knew and fully understood the lives and thinking of the populace. I had previously thought their thoughts, felt their resentment, endured their kind of anxiety in time of lack, felt powerless in the grip of the Roman governance. I now knew that none of the suffering was really necessary, knowing as I did the reality of existence, the reality of universal God. I could clearly perceive the foolishness of the Jews in authority, who were imposing a burdensome way of life upon the populace which was wholly erroneous and in direct contradiction of the truth of being. The situation made me deeply angry. Therefore I knew I had been perfectly fashioned and honed to become a purified instrument of divine action in Palestine, driven by my passion for truth and driven by my compassion for my fellow human being. Hence I called myself Son of Man, because I knew exactly what mankind was up against in their daily lives. Furthermore, I had perfect confidence I could achieve my objective of bringing truth to the people and thus be instrumental in changing the quality of their lives. For that reason, although I knew right at the outset of my mission there would be a penalty to pay for all I proposed to do, turned to known Jewish world upside down and inside out, I was prepared to face up to it, go through it, could not evade it, because I love people with Father love flowing through my heart and being. For Father, love is the essence of giving, giving itself into visible being and visible existence and growing, protecting, nourishing, healing, and fulfilling all the needs of all creation made visible. I knew I was the Father's gift of salvation to the people, to the world, not, as they supposed and taught down the centuries, salvation from the punishment meted out by an angry God to sinners, but to save people from the daily repetition of the same mistakes and wrong thinking which created their misfortunes, poverty, sickness, and misery. Because I loved the human race so deeply, I was prepared to teach and heal in defiance of the Jewish priest. I was prepared to die on the cross for what I had truly seen in the desert, knew with all my heart, and wanted to share to the last drop of my ability to do so. This is the truth behind my crucifixion and all the rest you have heard as man-made conjecture arising out of the Jewish practice of burnt offerings in the temple. I was a gift from the Father to mankind to help them surmount their ignorance of the laws of existence and find the true path of life leading to the joy, abundance, and perfect wholeness of the kingdom of heaven. These were the perceptions, the desires, the intentions and goals, and the thoughts which I bore within my mind and heart. This was the earthly, mental, emotional framework, clothing my spiritual consciousness, hidden within the head and figure of Jesus. It was my spiritual consciousness, channeled into the above forms of thought and feeling, which impelled me to set out on a 3-year journey to bring the people what I fully believed was a final rescue from their own blind thinking and feeling, which were creating their own troubled life. I truly believe that if only the people could be shown all that had been given to me to understand, they would realize their past folly and would make every effort to change their thinking and put foot to the path of life leading to the kingdom of heaven. To this end, I was prepared to give my life. Because of the wrong interpretation placed on my mission by Jewish teachers, my true message has been distorted out of recognition, and the purpose of these letters is to bring to the people of this new age the truth of what I really spoke of to the crowds in Palestine. Therefore, returning to my recounting of these days, let me take you back to a special day which bore fruit amongst my listeners and made a lasting impression in the minds of my disciples. Hence for me also, it was a particularly meaningful day. I took time off from the pressure of people to go into the hills to pray and meditate to recharge my spiritual batteries by making a deep, strong, more powerful connection with the Father within me. This connection was so rapidly obscured within my consciousness when I was busy amongst the crowds that I was exhausted. Arriving in a cave I used when in that area, I pulled out the pallet hidden under a rock and lay down to sleep. Instead of sleep, however, I felt the immediate inflow of divine life, the Father, and the tiredness was dissolved as my body was charged with the power which is the creative source of all being. I was lifted in consciousness into golden light, and as I was traveling upward within this light, I was suddenly changed to purest white, and I knew that in consciousness I was now at the portals of the equilibrium, which is the eternal, the universal, the infinite dimension beyond all conception of human mind. I observed the light, but was not of it, nor was it, powerfully within me, since this was the God dimension of the void, the no form of the universal equilibrium. But it communicated with me and infused me with its indwelling love. It impressed in me, yet again, that it was the creating, perfecting, healing process, love, governing all existence. I knew that wherever there was a lack, there would eventually be fulfillment, even as water flows to fill a lake. Where there is misery, there would be joy, because it was the nature of the universal to move into any living thing in need, to bring fulfillment and joy. I knew that where there was no growth, circumstance would arise to promote the growth. I knew that where there was no sense of failure, challenges would be provided to spur people into success and self-confidence. I saw that this love work constantly initiated by the Father in the lives of overburdened people might not be recognized as a gift of love by the recipients. They might be so sunk in their apathy, feeling of failure, their belief that nothing good could ever come their way. They would fail to see anything in their lives beyond their own beliefs and feelings. Hence they would remain rooted in their own self-created hell. There was no need to feel sorry for anyone. The only need was a compassionate heart and a determination to bring truth to heal their ignorance. The greatest gift a man could give to another was the enlightenment of ignorance of existence and its cosmic laws. For the truth was, every single soul was embraced within the universal, and the degrees of universal input via the Father, love work in their lives depended entirely on the individual's receptivity. I realized that what people needed urgently to hear was that I had just been told. They needed to see and fully realize the intention and the purpose and the potential of love, which was the very substance of their being. Because of their disbelief, they might cast the Father love work aside as being more pain-inducing challenge, and thus lie down in their failure forever. I now saw even more clearly I was sent to awaken people to all the possibilities for self-development, prosperity, and the achievement of joy and happiness. But it would be up to them to wake up and take advantage of what was offered them. I remember that this upliftment lasted all night, and in the morning I rose feeling alive as never before. My message had been clarified. I had seen even more clearly the reality of the Father and knew that I would be able to go out that day and meet the crowds and transmit to them the power and the life of what had been shown to me. As I climbed down from the cave, I came to a large rock overlarging a steep precipice. When I sat, I was able to look down over the town we were to visit that day. I could feel that perfecting process, that making whole impulse, the Father surging through me as I longed to share it with others before the problems of daily living could swamp it, and it should lose its power and driving force within my human consciousness. My disciples joined me a short while later. On entering the town, they spoke to the people and directed the gathering crowds to move on to a sloping ground beyond the dwelling place. Standing on a large rock in their midst, I began to speak. I found that the passion and the joy, the yearning, longing, and conviction were all spontaneously poured into the words I spoke to them. You are sorely pressed down and weary. Your tasks grow heavier as you get older. Your bellies are often empty. Your clothes get threadbare. People make you angry, and you feel there's no end to your trouble and heaviness of spirit. But this is not the truth concerning your existence. Your lives were intended to be very different. If you could only see beyond the feeling, if you could only lift your minds to make contact with the Father within you, you would be able to see and know what your state of existence should be. You would realize that you were created to enjoy abundance, protection, good health, and happiness. But because daily you live in fear of good and evil, and believe and expect these more than you believe that the Father is abundant life and love within you, supplying you with all things necessary for health and well-being, it is your most feared good and evil experiences you attract into your lives and bodies. Your belief in good and evil obscure, cloud over all that the Father has in store for you, if only you believe in Father love. You judge your todays and expect of your tomorrows what you have experienced in the past. Therefore, all the ills of your yesterday continually repeated in the future. You are enslaved by your memories, and your undeviating belief that it was past before must return again and again to burden and wound you. You do not need to heal your bodies or try to make your lives better. You need to heal your beliefs. I have told you there is nothing solid under the sun. If you could heal your belief, bring your beliefs into line with the Father's true intention for you, the wrong beliefs governing your bodies and lives would dissolve like the mist in the sun. Your every circumstance would immediately come back to the divine intention behind all creation. You would find that for every difficulty, for every lack of every kind, there is always a means to the end of the difficulty. There is always a filling of your basket to meet your need. What do you think happens when the sick come to me and I lay my hands upon them? Am I thinking about the illness? Am I wondering if the person will be healed? Am I afraid the Father may be sleeping or is so far away it cannot be heard? No. If these were my disbelieving thoughts, there would be no healing. When a person approaches me for healing, I immediately rejoice because I know that the power which is in the Father is within me, ready and willing to heal the moment I ask. I give thanks because I know that the Father's will is health, not sickness. Therefore I pray that the Father's will be done in the sick person. As I remove the belief in sickness from the sick person's body and know that the Father's will of health is flowing into the system, so does the appearance of the sickness change into the reality of Father's health, and the body is made whole once more. Sickness is nothing more than a lowering of vitality, a reduction of life within the affected part. Restore Father life to the true intention and plan of your system, and the entire system functions as it should. You have been told that God sends sickness, plague, famine, destruction to nations when they do not keep His laws. You have been told that you yourselves are punished by an angry God for sins you have committed. What is punishment but evil doing under the guise of goodness? I say to you that evil does not come from God. How can God be of two parts, good and evil? It is only in your minds that you conceive good and evil. Only in your hearts do you think and feel it. These thoughts and feelings have nothing to do with the true God, which is the Father within you, bringing you every good thing, if you will but believe this is so. It is your belief in good and evil, and the good and evil in your hearts, which brings you sickness. In reality, you live within the kingdom of heaven, and the kingdom of heaven is within you, and you are governed by the Father. But because you believe in the punishment from God, believe that only sacrifice in the temples will save you, believe that you are heir to sickness, poverty, misery, you create with your mind the very thing you do not want. Be not downcast, rejoice and be glad, and know that those who experience lack, far from being punished and abandoned by God, even though they have sinned, are truly blessed. The man who is nothing is rich in the power of the Father, if he will but heed it, trust it, and live within it. For when your bellies are filled, and your bodies know ease, and your minds and hearts are comfortable, you have no urgent and present need of the Father to become active within you to fulfill your needs. You believe by your own thoughts and hands do you fulfill your own needs easily. So when you speak of God, you only speak of what you have heard spoken by others. You yourself have no direct experience of God. Consider the rich. They are sunk, bound, bogged down in their own riches. They get up in the morning and go about their daily business, knowing nothing about the power of the Father within them. They think the thoughts which will increase their riches, the thoughts which will boost the self. They send out commands which will burden those who serve them. They live their lives according to their own choosing. Therefore, because they draw their limited life only from their own limited human thinking arising from their bodily minds and hearts, they get sick and experience as much misery as does a man who is nothing. They do not realize they are only half alive because they are not in touch with the source of life, the Father within them. Neither do they ever see that much of good which has come into their lives is not of their own devising, but is the love work of the Father hidden within. The religious leaders are at ease in their own comforts of position of authority. They have no need of anything beyond their own physical satisfaction. Because they have no personal knowledge of God, they must read from their holy books, the words of holy men spoken 1,000 years ago, and tell the people what they think the words mean. But they all speak is drawn from their own little minds, which are imprisoned in the comforts of their lives, sunk in the expectations of what they shall eat and drink and what apparel they will wear to impress the people. They know nothing of the inspiration which gave birth to the words spoken by the prophets all these centuries ago. Neither do they know whether these words are what they really need to hear at this moment, for times have changed. Believe me, the rich men and the religious leaders are strongly in earthly things, and do not want to be moved on from all that they regard as secure and everlasting in their traditions and observances. Any deviation will shake the foundation of their beliefs and therefore of their lives, and so they build mental defenses against the inflow of the power of the Father. They too get sick, and they in their own way know misery, as they do who have no earthly comforts. There is no difference between you who have little in life and those who have it all, for rich and poor alike get sick, make enemies, find themselves alone. But the potential for you gaining more than the religious and rich can ever hope to gain in health, happiness, good fellowship, achievement in your chosen way of life is enormous. And when it is all accomplished, you will know that the opportunities, the ability, the inspiration, all came from the Father within. Because you will know you could never have done such things if you had not asked the Father within you to help you to use all of your talents, to put plenty of food in your cupboards, and clothes on your back, and happiness and good life for your children. All these things will the Father do for you, if you will but ask and believe and know and remember at all times, that it is the Father nature to create, and then provide abundantly for all its creation. Just as you would not willingly deprive your children of the things they need, so will your Father never willfully deprive you of all you need for a happy life. If you are poor, it is because you have not yet understood the nature of the Father, nor have you understood that you must work with the Father to fulfill your own needs. You must immediately grasp the divine opportunities presented to you to help you forward. If only I could show you and make you see and believe that when you mourn, your sadness is known to the Father. In time, your sadness will be changed to joy, if you will but turn to the Father and watch the work of the Father love is doing to you. You will find comfort beyond anything you thought possible. How blessed you are when you are hungry and when you are thirsty, for your needs are known to the Father. Shortly these needs will be satisfied if you cease to wail and begin to pray to the Father and ask, believing that you will receive. How can you believe that to eat and be properly clothed, you must first go to the temple and offer burnt sacrifices of the Father's own living creatures to pay for your own sinning? Can you not see that the living things you burn have been created to enjoy life, even as you have been created to enjoy life? They have been created to be blessings and blessed on this earth, even as you have been born to be both blessing and blessed, for this is the nature of Father love revealed in its creation. If you remember that what you truly believe is what you get, can you not see that this Jewish belief in temple sacrifices of living things will bring you nothing but misery? Believe in punishment, and punishment is what you will get. Believe in killing and destruction as being the right way to reach God, and that is what you will experience, killing and destruction. If you are hungry and thirsty, it is because you are turning away from the Father within you. By indulging your fearful thoughts, anxieties, and feeling of hopelessness, you are creating the very conditions you want to rectify. You are doing all these bad things to yourself. Therefore, even more blessed are you when you hunger and thirst for goodness and for contact with the Father within you, because then you will surely be filled up 100 times over. Blessed are you when you are attacked and robbed, because you will see God in action when you stand still in perfect trust and see deliverance taking place. Blessed are you when you are caught up in conflict, yet you can still care about your fellow man and be the peacemaker. You carry the love in your heart, which is of the Father, and you are truly a child of the Father. Blessed are you when you have been deeply wronged by another, yet can forgive and show mercy, abstaining from seeking justice or the means to persecute him. You put yourself directly in harmony with the love which is God active within you, and even so will you be spared in times of trouble. Most blessed of all are the pure in heart, for such as these have rid themselves of all anger, hatred, vindictiveness, unkindness, envy, hardness of heart, and stand before the word of love made visible. They know the reality called God, and they will know the reality is the Father within them. How can I help you to see this great truth? How can I help you see the reality of the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God? You do not have to look up at the sky, because that is not where you will see the activity of the Father so clearly that it must surely reinforce your faith. This is where people, down the centuries, have made the big mistakes of turning in towards their dreaming, their imagination, and creating for themselves a Jehovah which does not exist. You will not find the Father someplace in heaven above you. The Father is in no special place, but everywhere around you and within everything. You can see the Father's marvelous works. Look around you at the growing things, the wheat, the grass, the flowers, the trees, and the birds, and in every living thing you will see the mysterious and wonderful work of the Father ceaselessly active. It is here that the Father is perfectly in control. You can see that there is perfect law and order, growth, development, and eventually the harvest to bless both man, beast, and bird. Consider the way that a man, after tilling his field, will scatter seed over the earth and cover it over. He packs up his tools and goes home, content that eventually, if there is sufficient rain, there will be food for him to feed his children. For many days he sleeps and wakes and does nothing more to his plants, but when he visits them, he will see the blades of green pushing through the soil. Later he will return and see the growth of stalks and leaves, and later on again he will see the forming of the seed. And one day he will see the grain is plump and golden and ready to harvest. Meanwhile, all this growth has taken place without any help from him. The wheat was grown in a marvelous way that he cannot explain. Is it magic? No, it is the work of the Father, the power, loving intelligence throughout the universe, which inspires the work and respires through it. It is the activity of the Father, which is the intelligent life of the universe. When you enter the kingdom of God, you have a good feeling. You feel happy and joyous. Can you imagine how a woman would feel if she lost a large sum of money and wondered how she would feed her children? The woman of the house would be in tears and would sweep the house so thoroughly that there would be no speck of dust. Then, hidden in a dark corner, she finds a treasured piece of silver, and immediately her tears are dried. She begins to smile and then feels so alive and so joyous that she rushes out of her house to call on her neighbors to have a celebration party. Where she had thought she had lost everything, she was now rich after all. So it is when you find the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God. Instead of tears and fears and hunger and sickness, you find the peace, joy, plenty, and health of the kingdom of God. You never experience any kind of lack again. The kingdom of God can also be likened to a very rich man who was a dealer in pearls. All his life he had wanted to find a special pearl which would outshine all others. It would be flawless and perfect, and he would be the very envy of every other dealer. One day he found such a pearl, beautiful beyond imagining, perfect beyond all others. He sold everything he owned, he abandoned all that he had accumulated, to buy this pearl, and was happy beyond all dreaming. What does this mean? It means that all the things he had previously valued in his life, his richly furnished house, his valuable, his way of life, plenty of food and drink, he gladly gave them all up in order to possess the treasure beyond price. The knowledge leading him into the kingdom of God, where happiness is a state of mind, which cannot be touched by the outer world with all its cares and worries. The kingdom of God is within you. You enter the kingdom of God when you fully realize that the Father is active at all times within you. It is a state of mind, of perception and understanding that the reality behind and within all things visible is the Father, and is beautiful, perfect, and that all the things which are contrary to beauty, harmony, health, abundance, are the creation of man's wrong thinking. How have I grieved over you who suffer, but you do not need to suffer if you listen to what I have to tell you. But I must warn you that the path leading into the kingdom of heaven is difficult to follow, because it means first you have to deal with yourself. Why is it that the self you have to deal with? Because out of your desire to protect and promote your own personal good come all of your selfish thoughts, words, and actions. You will probably ask, why should I have to worry about these? If what you say is true, that there is no punishment, that God sees not our evil, then why should we be concerned about the way we behave? There is so much here to be learned that I hardly know where to begin. As I have explained you, draw your life from the Father. Therefore, you draw your capacity to think and love from the Father. Even as Father intelligence is creative, so is your consciousness creative. When your minds and hearts, you actually form the plans of your lives and experience. And what kind of lives do you plan and form in your mind? If someone annoys or hurts you, you retaliate in some way or another. You believe that if your eye is taken, you must expect the adversary's eye in return. You believe that whoever killed should be killed as punishment and compensation. You believe that whoever robs you should pay the price. That whoever steals your wife should be stoned along with your wife. You believe in the extraction of payment for every evil thing that comes your way. Since it is human nature to hurt others, and you have been taught to retaliate, your lives are a continual scene of warfare. Warfare in the home against husbands, wives, children, and neighbors, and public figures, and between nations. Your Father knows nothing of this warfare in your lives, but knows the stress in your minds and bodies arising from this warfare, but can do nothing to ease your pain until you yourselves stop the warfare. You yourselves must cease your fighting and live in peace with your family, neighbors, employers, public figures, and other countries. Only then can the Father love work take place in your minds, heart, bodies, and lives. Only then will you be able to recognize and see the love work being done in you and for you by the Father. Remember also the great law: you reap exactly as you sow. You cannot pick figs from brambles or grapes from thorn trees or harvest wheat from weeds. Think about this and understand this parable, because it is very important to you, not only today, but also throughout all your days and years to come, even into eternity. So if you want to change your lives, change your thoughts. Change your words arising from those thoughts. Change your actions arising from those thoughts. What is in your minds will create all your experience, your sickness, poverty, unhappiness, and despair. A man shouted out to me, "Tell us, teacher, how do we remain peaceful when our neighbors, when they themselves will give us no peace?" I said to him, smiling, "When your neighbor comes to you and says he has to travel some distance away and does not want to go alone and asks you to go with him, what do?" The man laughed. "If my neighbor wanted to take me away from what I was doing, I would not be pleased. I would tell him to find someone else to go with him as I was busy." "And how would your neighbor feel?" I asked. The man shrugged. "I don't know." "And next time you needed him to do you a favor, how will he respond to your asking?" The man was no longer laughing. He did not reply. Another man said, "He will swear at him and tell him to go elsewhere for help." I said to the people, "He has answered rightly. And how will he feel?" I pointed to the man who had first spoken, smiling at him. A woman shouted above the laughter, "He will tell everyone he meets what a selfish and miserable neighbor he has. Perhaps he will want to hurt him in some way." There were shouts of agreement, and I nodded. Yes, he will have forgotten that he was once asked by his neighbor to walk 1 or 2 miles with him, and he refused. He will not see the law of reaping and sowing at work in his life. He set it in motion when he refused to go a mile with his neighbor, and now he was reaping of his attitudes and actions. Of what use to be angry when he has created a situation all by himself? The people laughed and nodded and spoke to one another. Never before had they heard such knowledge of human behavior. Here was an entirely new teaching. I said to them, "I advise you, when your neighbor comes to you asking you to walk a mile with them, or anything else that will make him more at ease and happy, first think about what you would like him to do for you if you also had the need. How would you like him to respond to your request?" A murmur swept through the crowd, and I could see that they understood what I was telling them. In fact, if your neighbor asks you to go 1 mile, do it with a happy, easy agreement, and be prepared to go on to do 2 miles if necessary. When you refuse people, you do not realize it, but you tighten up your minds and bodies, ready to protect yourself from being forced to do something you do not want to do. You tighten up your minds and bodies, and the Father is tightened up also, and cannot do its love work within you. And out of this tightening comes sickness. Again, you may meet someone sorely in need who is cold and unhappy. He may ask you for your coat. Don't pass him by, glaring at him. Some people laughed. They knew this was what they would do. No, give him your coat. And if he is really cold, give him your cloak also. Go your way rejoicing. Rejoicing? A disbelieving voice asked. I laughed and said, "Yes, my friend, rejoicing. Firstly, because you had a coat and a cloak to give, and then rejoicing because you realize that now you have a lack of coat and cloak yourself. Your Father within you will shortly return the coat and cloak to you in some surprising way. If, however, you give coat and cloak and then continue walking grumbling to yourself, 'Now why did I do that? I was foolish. Now I will be cold instead of him, and people will laugh at me because I have given my coat and cloak and left myself with nothing. And what will my wife say when I get home?' The people were nodding and laughing, enjoying the picture of the man who gives away coat and cloak, and then remembers what an evil thing he has done to himself. I knew that very often they did deprive themselves to help others, and then regretted their generosity afterwards. I waited a moment, and then shouted in a loud voice to get their full attention. 'But have I not told you that you reap as you sow? Have I not told you clearly that your thoughts, words, actions create your future circumstance? So what you want to sow and reap after you have given your coat and cloak to a stranger? Do you want your gifts restored to you, or do you want to be without coat and cloak for a long time, because that is what will happen to you if you go on your way angry and upset because you gave away your coat and cloak? Your words and actions will seal, make hard like rock the poverty you have brought upon yourself by giving away your coat and cloak. The people were no longer smiling and laughing. They were very quiet and listening intently. Remember, first do to others what you would have them do to you. Then there will be peace and contentment in your minds and hearts, and the Father will be able to do its love work within your bodies, minds, and heart. Give and give abundantly, and rejoice that you have gifts to give to those in need. Because as you give, so will your gifts be restored to you in a way that you most need them. Give with happy hearts. Give in the faith and knowledge that where there is lack in your lives, so will the Father do its love work abundantly in you and for you. Do nothing with heavy heart, because a heavy heart is what you will continue to have. Give everything with joyous spirit, that everything in your life may bring to you only joy and spiritual insight. A man commented, "This is against human nature. It is natural to be anxious about the future. Clothes are expensive. Food is not easily come by. Life is a constant struggle." I answered him in a loud voice because he was only saying what I knew most of my listeners were thinking. But you do not know for sure that tomorrow you will be struggling to live. You do not know that tomorrow you won't have a splendid job or any other wonderful thing come your way. You do not know this, but you are making very sure for yourself that there will not be a marvelous job or some other wonderful opportunity in life because you are creating the circumstances of your tomorrows. He was angry. I am? How am I doing that? Have I not just told you? I turned to the people laughing. Tell me, how has this man up in front in the red cloak created his tomorrow? The crowd was silent. Then a very young man, Mark, shouted to me. I know. He said he would be struggling to buy food and clothes. You have told us that what we think and talk about is what we will get. Exactly, I said. You are a very clever boy. You have understood. Take care that you do not create for yourself the things you do not want. And I will be happy for you to become my disciple when you are older, and your parents will let you go. Some of the people laughed, but some did not. I could say they did not believe a word I was saying. You will never enter the kingdom of heaven by being anxious. If you are having a hard time today, why moan about it? Will it make you feel better if you go about complaining? Will your crying brighten your day? And if you are anxious about your tomorrow, you are making your tomorrows burdensome and weary even before you get to them. Why do it? Why goodwill do it for you? What did anxiety ever accomplish anything for you? You might as well try to make yourself taller by being anxious that you are short. No, do not dwell on the things you do not have. Dwell on the things which can be yours if you turn to the Father within you and ask in perfect faith, believing you will receive. And I tell you without fear of contradiction that you will receive. But you must ask properly, believing. You will receive nothing if you ask, but at the same time wonder whether you have been heard or whether the Father will feel like giving you what you want. This is the human way of giving, but not the way of the Father, which gives abundantly and fulfills your needs. The Father always pours its gift upon you, gifts of food in plenty, clothes, house, friends, providing you yourself have a clean heart and mind, and providing you constantly rely on the Father as you moment by moment support. If you pray and do not receive, do not for one moment think it is because there is no Father, or the Father does not listen to you. Rather, you must ask yourself what is in you that is preventing the Father's love work being done in and for you. If you go to the altar and pray or offer a gift, on the way there you remember that you have quarreled with someone. Turn around and go to that person and make peace with him. Then when you approach the Father in prayer, you will have a clean and pure mind, and you will be heard by the Father, and the Father will be able to respond, giving you all you need in the peace and quietness of your being. If you still cannot believe that the Father cares for its creation, look about you at the radiant flowers in the field. How beautiful they are! Consider the brilliant thought which has gone into their design, their beauty. Where will you find the colors that you see in the petals? With all his wisdom, Solomon himself was not able to have such a beautiful clothes made for himself. See the way the flowers attract the bees, and the bees help to bring next season's seed, to make your world wonderful and beautiful and give you food. Why can you not believe and trust in the Father when the world around you is planned, designed, and cared for such in a wonderful way? But remember, These living plants and trees, unlike mankind, cannot complain about their lot and see themselves as hungry and naked, and so they do not undo the work the Father does in them. It is you, with your continual complaining and talking about your lack, your aggression towards each other, your insistence on retribution, your criticism and slandering, which makes you lack, and your sickness, consistent day after day. I have told you all these things to prepare you, who are sick, for healing. You cannot be healed unless you believe with all your hearts that healing will take place. Remember that sickness of the body arises from an illness within the mind, such as your bad temper, resentment, angers, and hatreds. Father love is the source of all health. Therefore, all thoughts and feelings contrary to Father love bring sickness. Just as all your evils and sickness begin in the mind, so does your good. Have as much care for your neighbors as you have for yourself. Bless your neighbor when you have an argument. Pray for him when he is harsh with you. Help him out in any way you can at all times, even if he turns his face from you, because then you are constructing good in your mind and thoughts, and good will be the harvest of your sowing. Not only this, you are bringing your mind into harmony and attunement with the Father within you, which is perfect love. Under these conditions, the Father can do its perfect love work in you. When I finished speaking, the people brought their sick to me, and according to their faith were they healed. Letter 3 will describe more of Christ's teaching and explain the events leading to his crucifixion and death. He describes in poignant detail his Last Supper with the disciples when he found himself alone in spirit because the disciples, till the last, refused to believe he would be crucified. Repeatedly he was misunderstood, and he realized again how little he had managed to teach anyone during his 3 years of missionary work. He was glad to be leaving. End of Letter 2.